Come closer, sweetheart. Pull that blanket up and let me tell you a story. Not one with castles or dragons, no. This one's about something far more real. It's about a woman named Mary. Now, Mary wasn't old in the way people think of old. She still remembered songs from her younger days, still liked her coffee just right, still smiled when the sun came through her kitchen window. But life had a way of piling up on her, little by little, until one morning she found herself sitting at her table, staring at numbers that just wouldn't behave. Mary lived on $1,300 a month. That was all. Every dollar had a job, every penny had a place. At least it was supposed to. But the world had changed, you see. One winter morning, Mary wrapped her sweater tighter and looked at her rent notice. $400, she whispered. Now, once upon a time, that might have been enough for a small place of her own, but not anymore, not in her town, not anywhere nearby. So Mary didn't have her own apartment. No, she rented a single room in a quiet house owned by a widow named June. The walls were thin and the floor creaked at night, but it was safe, and sometimes that's the best you can hope for. Mary would sit on her little bed and say to herself, "A roof is a blessing, even if it's just one room." Now food was a different kind of puzzle. Mary used to shop without thinking too much. A little chicken here, some fresh fruit there, maybe a treat if it had been a long week. But those days had slipped away. Now she stood in the grocery store holding a pack of chicken, turning it over in her hands. 5 meals, she murmured. This has to be 5 meals. Everything became a calculation. Eggs, beans, canned tuna, those became her companions. She learned to cook the same meals again and again, not because she loved them, but because they worked. And sometimes, late at night, she'd sip her tea and say, "Well, it's warm and it fills me up." There were days she skipped things, not always meals, but the little extras. Juice? No. Soda? Not worth it. Even a small treat started to feel like a luxury meant for someone else. And then came the medicine. Ah, child, this is the part that makes an old heart ache. Mary lined up her prescriptions on the counter, small bottles, each one holding something she needed, something her body depended on. She'd squint at the price and sometimes laugh, soft and tired. "Maybe I can stretch this one," she'd say, "just a few more days." Not because she didn't care about her health. Oh no, she cared very much, but she cared about surviving the month too. Sometimes she'd ask the pharmacist, "Is there a cheaper one?" Sometimes she'd nod quietly when there wasn't. And then there was her old car. That car had been with her for years. It rattled a little when it started and the paint had faded under the sun, but it was hers, paid off, reliable enough. Mary treated that car like a dear friend. She drove gently, avoided long trips, planned her errands like a chess game. "One trip, Mary," she'd tell herself, "make it count." Because gas had a way of creeping up, stealing from the rest of her life. And insurance, maintenance, those weren't optional. Every mile had a cost. Back at home, Mary became careful with everything. She'd turn off lights as she moved from room to room. She'd wash clothes in cold water, hang them to dry when she could. "Every little bit," she'd whisper. Even her phone, just a simple plan, no extras, no upgrades. She'd had the same device for years. And the small things, the things people don't think about, soap, toothpaste, laundry detergent, Mary stretched them all. Use a little less, she'd remind herself. It'll last longer. She kept a small list in her drawer, only what she truly needed. No wandering through store aisles, no impulse buys, just the essentials. Now, if you added it all up, rent, food, medicine, gas, utilities, little household things, you'd think there'd be something left over. But there wasn't much. Maybe a little, a tiny bit, just enough to catch her as something unexpected happened. But life, dear, life doesn't always ask permission before it surprises you. And so Mary lived carefully, thoughtfully, some might even say beautifully in her own quiet way. She wasn't wasteful, she wasn't careless, she wasn't doing anything wrong. She was simply trying to make numbers stretch in a world where they didn't stretch the way they used to. And sometimes, late at night, she'd sit by her window looking out at the street lights and wonder how everyone else was managing, how they were making it all work, and whether tomorrow would be just a little easier than today. And one evening, as the wind rattled softly against the window, Mary reached for her notebook. Mary reached for her notebook, the one with the worn blue cover and soft bent corners. She kept it tucked in the drawer beside her bed, like a quiet companion. Inside, there were numbers, yes, but also little thoughts, reminders, even a few hopeful plans she hadn't quite given up on. She opened to a fresh page and wrote at the top, "How am I going to make this work?" Now that might sound like a sad question, child, but it wasn't. Not entirely. There was something steady in the way she wrote it. Not defeat, no, not that. It was determination. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't make a fuss, just keeps going. Mary tapped her pen gently against the page. "Well," she said to herself, "let's see what we can do." She started listing things. Call the pharmacy, ask again about discounts, check the food pantry schedule, ask June if she needs help around the house. Now June, that sweet widow who owned the house, she had kind eyes and a slow way of speaking. One afternoon, Mary found her struggling with groceries at the front door. "Oh, let me help you with that," Mary said, rushing over. "Well, thank you, dear," June smiled. "These bags aren't getting any lighter with age." Mary carried them in, set them neatly on the counter, and without much thought began putting things away. A quiet rhythm formed between them after that. Some days Mary would sweep the porch, other days she'd help with small chores. And one evening, June said almost casually, "You know, Mary, you've been such a help. If things ever get tight, we can always work something out with the rent." Mary paused, just for a moment. Then she smiled, soft, grateful. "Thank you, June. That means more than you know." Now, you see, child, sometimes help doesn't come in big, loud ways. Sometimes it comes in small sentences, spoken gently in a kitchen. But even with kindness like that, life didn't suddenly become easy. One week, Mary's car made a strange noise, a low, worrying sound when she turned the key. She sat there, hands on the steering wheel, listening. "Not now," she whispered. "Please, not now." She didn't panic. No, Mary had learned better than that. Panic doesn't fix engines. So she did what she always did. She thought, "Okay, I'll combine trips, only drive when I have to, maybe ask for a ride to the doctor if needed." She adjusted. She always adjusted. And then there were the days when the pantry shelves looked a little too bare. Those days, Mary would put on her coat and walk to the local food pantry. The first time had been hard. Oh, very hard. She stood outside for a long moment, hand on the door. "I never thought I'd be here," she murmured. But then she took a breath and walked in. Inside, no one judged her. No one whispered. There were other people too, quiet, polite, just trying to get by. She picked up a few items, canned vegetables, bread, sometimes even eggs if she was lucky. On the walk home, she carried that bag carefully, like it was something precious. Because it is, she'd remind herself. It is. Now listen closely, sweetheart, because this is the part people don't always see. Mary wasn't just surviving, she was learning. Learning how to stretch, how to ask, how to accept help without letting it take her dignity. She became clever with her meals. She found ways to make things last. She discovered little tricks, like how a bit of vinegar and baking soda could clean almost anything. She laughed once, standing in her tiny room holding a cloth. Well, look at that. Who needs all those fancy cleaners anyway? And still, even with all that strength, all that effort, there were nights when the quiet felt a little too heavy. She'd sit by the window again, watching the world pass by, and think about how many others were out there just like her. People doing everything right and still finding it hard. And that's when she started wondering something new. Not, what am I missing? But, what are others doing? She leaned forward in her chair, as if the whole world might be listening. How are you making it work? She asked softly into the quiet room. Did you find a way to lower your bills? Did someone help you the way June helped me? Did you have to make a hard choice, one that changed everything? Her fingers traced the edge of her notebook. And what about the hard days? She whispered. What do you do when it all feels like too much? She wasn't asking out of weakness, no, she was reaching out. Because somewhere deep down, Mary understood something important. No one gets through this alone. So now, child, let me ask you just like Mary would. If you were sitting across from her at that little kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee between you, what would you tell her? What's been the hardest part for you lately, and how did you manage to get through it? Mary would listen, you know. She'd nod gently, maybe even write a few things down in that blue notebook of hers. Mary would listen, you know. She'd nod gently, maybe even write a few things down in that blue notebook of hers. And before you stood up to leave that little kitchen, before the coffee got cold and the evening light faded, she'd smile and say something simple, something warm. Thank you for sitting with me. And I'll say the same to you, sweetheart. Thank you to those of you who've stayed, who've listened, who've already joined this little circle by subscribing. It truly means more than you might think. You're part of something kind here, something that reminds people they're not alone. And if you haven't yet, well, I'd gently nudge you just like a grandmother would. Go on and subscribe. Stay a while. Give this story a like if it touched your heart, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Because stories like Mary's, child, they're everywhere. And sometimes the smallest act, listening, sharing, caring, can make a world feel a little less heavy. Now, where were we? Ah, yes, Mary, sitting by the window, her blue notebook resting gently in her lap. The night had settled in, quiet and soft, like a blanket over the world. The street lights glowed faintly outside, and for once, Mary wasn't thinking about numbers. Not the bills, not the prices, not the worry that usually followed her like a shadow. Instead, she was thinking about people, about voices like yours. She turned a page in her notebook and began to write again. But this time, it wasn't a list of expenses or plans. It was something different. At the top, she wrote, "Things that helped." And underneath, slowly, carefully, she added, "A kind landlord, a food pantry that didn't ask questions, a paid-off car that still runs, a warm cup of tea at night, people who understand." She paused, then smiled just a little. "You don't have to have everything," she whispered. "Just enough, and a little kindness along the way." Now, life didn't suddenly become easy after that. No, child, it rarely does. The bills still came, prices still rose, some days were still heavy, and some nights still felt long. But something inside Mary had shifted. She no longer asked, "Why can't I make this work?" Instead, she began asking, "What can I do with what I have?" And that question, well, it changed everything. She started noticing small blessings more clearly. A neighbor who waved, a sunny afternoon that warmed her room just enough to keep the heater off, a loaf of fresh bread from the pantry that lasted longer than expected. Little things, but little things, when you're paying attention, can feel like a lot. One afternoon, June knocked softly on her door. "Mary," she said, "I made too much soup again. Would you like some?" Mary chuckled. "Funny how that keeps happening." They shared that soup at the kitchen table, talking about nothing in particular. Old memories, small stories, quiet laughter. And in that moment, there was no stress, no shortage, just two people, warm and full, in more ways than one. Later that evening, Mary returned to her room and opened her notebook once more. She looked at the page filled with things that helped and added one more line at the bottom. Hope, even if it's small. She closed the notebook gently and set it beside her bed. Then she turned off the light. And as she lay there, listening to the quiet creak of the house and the distant hum of the world outside, she realized something simple, something steady. She was still here, still trying, still making it, day by day, choice by choice. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. So if you ever find yourself sitting at your own table, staring at numbers that don't quite add up, thinking you're the only one trying to stretch too little into enough, remember Mary. Remember that there are others out there quietly doing the same, adjusting, adapting, holding on. And remember this, sweetheart. Even in the hardest seasons, when life feels tight and uncertain, there is strength in continuing, there is dignity in trying, and there is quiet beauty in making it through one more day. Now, rest easy. The night is gentle, and tomorrow, well, tomorrow will come just like it always does.